That's right now. Good afternoon. Today we're going to talk to Nancy H. Bax-Sachleben, a long-term resident in Laurel Springs. She was born in Laurel Springs. What are your early memories of Laurel Springs?
The earliest I had of myself, I was in a coach in the backyard, sunning myself. I guess my mother had me all in blankets. And we had neighbors across the street on Locust Park, Marshalls, who had a dog named Ronnie. And Ronnie took to me like he was my dog. And so he came over every day, and he was lying on the ground next to the coach. And Dr. Brown lived across the street from us on Glen.
That's Stanley Brown.
Had a Great Dane, Olaf. And Olaf, he used to come in the house once in a while too while we were eating dinner, but he came around the corner while Ronnie, the dog that was guarding me, must have put up a real racket, because this is my earliest memory of that. And my mother tells me that I was lost for a while. I must have been about 3 or something, and Mrs. Brown across the street had invited me inside for tea, and so they had the police looking for me and all, and you know.
Yes.
Now that's very early in my that I remember. Coming up as I was growing older, going down to Laurel Lake. My mother gave me a strainer and some kind of container, and I would scoop out everything that I could and bring it home that was alive and put it in a little area that my father had that had water in it. I went fishing with my father on Laurel Lake, caught salamanders in Crystal Springs when my father would pick the watercress.
Half the town showed up at Crystal Springs in watercress season.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
There were people all over the place picking watercress, and I remember my family picked watercress there too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my dad actually sold it. He did sell. Well, we ate it, but he did sell it. My cell phone's going to be on. Anyway, then I used to go fishing for sunnies. On Mr. Davidson's dock.
Yes.
Down there on Park, the end of Park, and then my father used to trap for muskrat. Yes. And whatever else he caught, and we used to. My mother would cook stew of some kind. Sure. Went to grammar school in Laurel and had a small class of about 20 people, I think, and when we got older, we had something called a canteen, which you could dance to music, and then we went to Arlene's sweet shop afterward. And and then high school, we took a bus, public service bus, to Overbrook, and that's about my earliest memories.
Some neat memories. Really neat memories. What neighbors do you remember? What can you tell us about the neighborhood?
Okay, on Locust, I was right across the street from my grandfather Bax. And
that's Al?
Huh?
That's Al Bax?
No, that's my father.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, his name was, funny, I can't remember it. It's probably due to this. Anyway, my grandfather and grandmother lived across the street, and then my grandmother passed away. My Aunt Doris and Uncle Bud came in, and they took over and had children, so we were always very close, back and forth. Mr. Drowdy lived right next door.
Yes.
And he had a greenhouse, a very big one, and he actually ended up shooting one of my cats because he didn't like cats being over there. And then next to them were the Thompsons, And that's where I saw my first TV show, was in the Thompsons. Across the street was Dr. Mick. Next to him was Rankin's. The Cranes were on the other side of that, Dr. Mick. And then Lyser's, and Dr. Brown, and then Mr. Swan, and then the McGoverns, and the Adams, the Alexanders, the Mayors. I remember a lot of people.
Yeah, yep. You have rather an extended family in the town, too. Various relatives.
Well, yes, I do.
Yeah.
My cousin Bonnie, she is a cousin of mine, and her children are all there. I don't have any immediate family, but I do have my cousin, which I cherish quite a bit.
As you think back, what are your memories about going to school and the activities in the school and some of the teachers and that sort of thing?
Yeah, okay. I remember walking to school, walking home to have lunch, and
Yes,
walking back.
everybody walked both ways.
Yes, and I remember Mrs. Polk was my kindergarten and first grade teacher, I think. Second grade, I can't remember the woman's name, but I know I didn't like her. And the next person I remember was Mrs. Riggs. She taught 5th and 6th, and Miss Carey taught 7th, and Salati, Rudy Salati,
yep.
and Jenny Wanawek taught 8th grade. And and I remember playing outside. I remember in 5th grade especially, I don't know why it was 5th grade, but we would have a snack, and they brought in small cartons of milk, and you could have chocolate or white milk, and everybody wanted chocolate,
Yes.
but they only served like maybe 5 chocolates, so every once in a while you would get it treated. I don't know if they figured it out how to be fair about it, but and graduation, I remember there, and that's about it, people.
Who were in your graduating class?
Well, Barbara Hawk.
I've heard of her.
And Barbara Pillow, Rainey Keene, Tommy Gardner, Dottie Ferris, Taffy Cruitt, Peggy Atkinson, Jimmy Taylor. I think I probably would remember if I saw their pictures, but
Sure.
and Jean Harper, Jean Townsend, Maria Bellardine, just to name a few others.
How about big events in the town? 4th of July, Halloween, other holidays.
Right.
How were they celebrated?
Well, Halloween, the night before was Mischief Night, and
Yes.
we would go out with corn, dried corn.
You didn't decorate the bank, did you?
No, but I have a cousin that did.
Yes, yes.
And it wasn't Bonnie.
No.
But no, then after that, people would hang toilet paper and very innocent things,
Yes.
knock on people's doors. And then the next day, of course, was you got dressed, I think, in school. And then you paraded in school, and then you paraded outside. Right after school, you went to house to house to house. And but anyway, that's what I remember.
About 4th of July. What did you do on 4th of July in town?
Decorate your bike
Yes.
and run the races. Okay, and being hot.
Yes, it was always hot.
Very hot.
Yes.
I think I was in 8th grade, and they had like a Miss Laurel Springs or something, and I still have pictures of that. And that was interesting. So that's what I remember.
You were also very active in your church. Can you talk a little bit about the church and the activities around the church and who was involved?
Well, I went to Sunday school. George Bryson was the, I guess, superintendent of that area.
Remember George well.
Yes. And there are a lot of people I remember from church, the Space and the Mullers and the Mix and Presbyterian Church was where I had gone, and I sang in the choir. There weren't a lot of activities, though, that I remember other than that.
All right. You've been very active in the community for many years. Would you tell us a little bit about some of the activities that you've been involved with?
Okay, let's see. I started taking pictures about, should have turned that off, about 9 years ago maybe. I took pictures of 4th of July and Memorial Day, and then I would post the pictures on Oak Tag and put them uptown.
Yep.
I did that. Then I joined the beautification historical group, and somehow I got involved with Pat Tamburino, and we ended up being the calendar girls. So that's something that we're looking to get more help with this year.
Sure.
But and then I was on the Board of Education for 6 years, and
What do you consider the highlights of your term on the Board of Ed?
the difficulties we were having with one superintendent. The town felt that the board was wrong in not having him come back another year. And then so you had a split board. You know, one didn't want him to come back and one did, and so you had a lot of friction at that. That's not a highlight.
Friction position.
But
yes.
there was a lot of upset about that,
yes.
and so that's. But I remember working with Sylvia Duda, and we sat down and came up with a policy book. We did that.
Something unheard of.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
So we did that together, and so that's what I remember.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most of the people we interview have been involved with lots of groups in the town and are still, even some of the people who are in the 80, 90 range are still involved. And it's amazing the interest in the town from the people who don't hold office in most cases. Would you tell us a little bit about Beautification Committee?
Well, it's comprised of people from town who are interested in beautifying and keeping a record, historical record of things that go on. And right now, we don't have a lot of people. We haven't really had. There's certain tasks that have to be done to take care of landscaping and the train station. And then the other thing was we do house tours once in a while, and that takes a lot of organization. And then we do the calendar, which takes about 6 months to really get into
it's a big job.
The final job. So,
you want to tell us about the house tour? It happens periodically, and it seems to be very popular. What do you do to set up the houses? How do you convince people to open their houses?
well, we generally get a feedback from some people. They knew that we would have house tours, and they say, "Are you going to have one?" And so we have that person down as a list, and then we encourage people to tell us. You know, if there's a house that's outstanding or something, we might, as a committee, broach that subject with the people. So it's like a two-way street. Some people are very interested in doing it, and then there are other people who we kind of persuade to do it. Yes. Right.
I hear you're going to do a house tour this Christmas.
Yes.
For the centennial. Do you have anything lined up yet that you can talk about?
Not really, no. It's we have to get started very soon. You know, you know, that's one thing, and so no, we don't have. We do need people to come forth, and hopefully we can do it.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, I think it's a plus to the community, and I do think the way you do it every couple of years makes it a little more special than if you do it every year, and people kind of look forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
In the bicentennial, or in the centennial year,
Uh-huh.
do you have any great plans for any of the committees that you're on other than the house tour?
Well, I don't know. That's an interesting idea. We basically don't, I guess, at this point in time. We have to gather there's new people coming into our group.
Yes.
Hopefully, we have a couple more volunteers, and so at that point, we'll be able to figure that out. But we might need people to be like within the house itself, that people come visit, so that's something we're looking for, volunteers.
Looking at the borough a little bit, there were a lot of organizations over the years. Let's start with the Scouts. Were you involved with Girl Scouts?
With what?
Girl Scouts?
No.
No. Were there any Scout-like groups, church or school that you were involved with?
Mm-mm.
No, okay. What do you remember about organizations like the fire company and the police department back in the days when they were all volunteers? Fire company's still all volunteers,
Yes.
but the police department is not.
Actually, my father told me he was not born in town, but it had been here for many years. He remembers the first policeman on a horse, and I remember the police men that were on, but I don't remember their names because I didn't really have any interchangeable, exchanges with them. But the fire company was great in that they came at Christmas time and
With Santa Claus.
and became Santa's helpers. And Larry Winters came when my husband and I were in the house to our children when they were little, and he is still coming to the house, and our children are not little anymore. So I do have fond memories of the fire company, and of course all that they do, the 4th of July, the Memorial Day. It's such a wonderful organization.
Yeah. One person who stands out in many interviews we've had was Papa Berger. And did you have any contact with Papa Berger when he was janitor of the school? Bill Berger.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yes, he actually had the wood shop, I think, for the boys.
For a short period, yes.
Yes, he did that. No, I remember him, fondly remember him. He was like a father, grandfather image.
Yes.
So that's about, no, well, his daughter was a scout leader.
Catherine or Marion?
I think it was Catherine.
Catherine, yes.
Yeah.
She was also a missionary.
Pardon?
She was a missionary.
Yeah, yes. And so I did have her as a scout leader, so I did get to see him maybe when she had us over. But Mrs. Berger was nice too. I remember both of them.
Yep, Anna Berger.
Anna Berger,
Yeah,
okay.
Anna Berger, yes. I knew them well because I lived catty-cornered across the street from them on Trenton Avenue.
Uh-huh.
And they had a little bitty farm in the back, and all of the kids would gravitate to the farm.
Okay.
And the Bergers were very friendly people, and that's kind of how the old story of the cow in the movies started, because it was Berger's cows. And a lot of people have talked about that, and it did happen. It is not folklore; it is in fact. And I've interviewed a couple of people who were immediately involved with it, shall we say? Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your father, Al. I knew Al in his later years, and he was really an interesting individual because he had a sense of history, and he was interested in documenting history. And I remember he did a project where he photographed every house of over about, let's say, 50 years old in the town and wrote what he knew about them or the owners or whatever, and that still exists in the Whitman Stafford Museum on the second floor, and we get people probably a dozen a year who come over who look up their house. And Al knew all about history, and Al wanted to preserve the history. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these projects?
Well, that's probably the DNA I have that came from my father.
Yep.
Yes. In fact, at this point in time, there's a gentleman, Bob Askew.
Yes.
He is documenting my father's book and putting it on a disc.
Yes.
So then that's being done. My father was a chemist for city service, and he had a large garden in the back. He talked about one day he would, before work in the morning, he would always go out, and he was working with pole lima beans or something, and he went to go touch them, and it was soft, and here it was a beehive. And so he ended up having to call somebody to get that out. But my dad, he enjoyed, he was a little league manager for a while. My father was on there. Actually, my cousin Bonnie was on the team.
Yes.
And it was contested at the time, but there was nothing in writing that a girl couldn't be on. So
Bonnie's a first-class athlete.
she was.
Yes, she was.
Excellent.
Yes.
She still is, you
Yes.
know. And then let's see, what else do I remember? My dad, when my mother passed away, he lived in the apartments up in Laurel, and I taught school in Lindenwold. And when I would come home every day, my father was parked right on the side of the house, and he had to come in and talk to me, and either he stayed for dinner or he was going out or something. And that went on for years, and I'm so grateful that he was around, because our children got to see their grandfather, and whenever we had a party, he was there, you know. So I have fond memories of my dad.
Yeah, a lot of people do. Particularly, I have a fond memory of him because he worked with us on the Whitman project, and nothing was ever too difficult or took too much time. He was more than willing to be involved, and he was involved in that project probably from the very beginning. Laurel Springs was quite a rural community with the Stafford farm and the Rexon farm. What are your memories of the farms?
Well, going up Warwick Road, was that the Stafford?
Stafford was at Laurel Road. He had two farms. One was at Laurel Road, basically behind the academy.
Right.
And then he had another farm up at where the post office is.
Yes.
And Rexon was, of course, over on Laurel Road and basically the White Horse Pike. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I remember as a child going up Warwick Road and seeing the bulls. The bulls looked very scary to me as a child.
Scary,
they were big. And so I do remember that. And then, of course, the one off of Walnut Avenue, I remember that.
Yeah, he had a pasteurizing plant there and did milk routes.
Did he? I didn't know
that. I can still remember the truck. He called it Golden Guernsey Milk because he had all Guernsey cattle.
Okay.
And it was a pretty good size herd for South Jersey. And I assumed that he served basically Laurel Springs and Lindenwold and into Clement and then a little bit north up into Somerdale. But it was quite an active business up until, my guess is, the late 50s or mid 50s. Then he sold out the farm and bought a new farm down in Maryland someplace. So I assume that there are still Staffords farming down there, but I don't know that.
Okay.
And the Rexon farm was also a dairy farm primarily, although he raised a lot of corn and silage. And he was up where UMD is today, because I think UMD bought up the whole farm there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yes.
And you might remember Mrs. Rexon because she was a substitute teacher in the school. And she had quite a science interest. And I remember when I went there, back in the dark ages, she would come in and we would do farm-related science projects, really. And it was really quite neat. At this point, we're slowly coming to an end here. Is there any favorite town memories you'd like to talk about that we have not covered?
Well, we were talking about farms.
Yes.
And when the movie house was there,
Mm-hmm.
My father, eventually he ended up being the film person who ran the films.
Oh, the projector operator.
Projector
Yes,
operator,
yes.
right. But he told me this story, I guess when he was a teenager, a group of them went to one of the farms and took a cow,
Mm-hmm.
and must have had a leash or something, and brought it into the movie house and walked it down the aisle where everybody screamed, and those kind of things, hijinks,
Yeah, that was the burger cow.
Oh, was that a burger cow?
Burger cow,
Okay.
yep.
And I remember we used to have Mr. Clark.
Charlie Clark.
Yes, Charlie Clark. And he would deliver the milk on the front steps in a box,
Mhm.
and it was raw
Mm-hmm.
milk with a nice cream on top.
Yep.
And if it got frozen, then the cream popped
Popped
up.
up, and all the kids went for the cream.
I know. So anyway, one year it was really bad snow and ice, and we had parked our car out front, and that's where Charlie came in with his truck behind us, delivered the milk, and then he got back in his truck and he couldn't move.
Got stuck, yep.
It got stuck. Well, he waited actually till we were up and saw the dilemma. I mean, he must have been there like at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
So, I felt badly about him. But and then we had Mr. Weissman. He was a man who came with fresh produce.
Yes.
Did you have him?
No.
No? Okay.
We had a fellow who would sell horseradish, and he walked the town, and he had a grinder and a sack over his shoulder with horseradish roots. Once a week he would go up to Camden and to whatever farmer's market it was and buy his week's supply. And he would walk up and down the street with a bell and go ding, 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 and very simply, people would come out with a dish, and he would grind up fresh horseradish, which was liquid fire, and it cost you something like 20 cents a dish.
Yes, right.
And you'd see him about every 2 weeks. And he was here and there through the town, and once in a while, people who would drive to Camden would see him walking to Camden, and they'd stop and pick him up and take him to Camden. It was that kind of a town.
Yes.
And if you were wandering around and you didn't look like you belonged there, whoever lived there is going to come out and say, who are you, where do you belong?
Yes.
And I know your parents, and if you get into trouble, guess what? Your parents are going to be told about it.
That's right. Yeah.
You get into trouble probably before you get home, your parents knew about it.
Right.
And it was kind of that kind of a community.
Right.
And on your side of the railroad tracks, which is the west side, most of the houses were sold kind of as farmettes because they had an extra lot or 2 lots beside them, and they had huge gardens. And a lot of the houses there were sold to former or current railroad personnel at that time,
Oh, okay.
because it was a housing development. It was Samuel Cord's housing development.
Yes, okay, yes.
And Sam sold lots and would build specialty houses. He's the same fellow who did Cold Spring Harbor.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And Sam had a problem. He turned up seriously dead about 15 years after he started in Laurel Springs. He was in the city, and he was shot by somebody. And I don't think they ever solved it, but it made the newspapers, and I've seen newspaper articles about it.
Okay.
And there were all kinds of implications, which the press is great at, but nobody knew about.
Okay, you're right.
It's all part of the history of the town. All right, well, we thank you so much for your time and your interest, and we're always looking for other people in the community that have an interest in the history and have been in the town a long time and know people and know organizations. So if you come up with anyone who is appropriate that we should interview, give us a call. We'd be more than pleased to have them.
Okay.
And thank you so much, and have a good day for the rest of the day.
Okay, and thank you very
Yep.
much for what you're doing
Oh, this is
for history.
This is a fun project. And,
Yes, that's what Barbara said.
and the interesting place is in the control room.
I know.
Where we sit there and we can talk back and forth, and the names that come up that you haven't thought of for 20,
Yes.
30, 50 years are
Yes.
amazing.
Oh, yes.
And Bob's father was chief of police in the town.
Was
So he, Alec Field, and he knows many people through that association, plus his own association. We just interviewed his wife,
Yes.
and she has a tremendous background. She should be the Laurel Springs historian.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a neat
Yes,
project.
yes.
And we thank you so much for participating.
You're welcome. Thank you.